Good day. As should come to no surprise whatsoever, I love video games. I have been gaming since I was a mere callow youth of 3. And that first game was not Mario or Sonic, rather it was Wolfenstein 3D. Now, that being said, I would have to say that I have a pretty hearty appreciation for first-person shooters. Now, my favorite first-person shooter of all time would have to be Turok 2, The Seeds of Evil. And as such, we're going to take a look at this game today.
When it comes to sequels, there are very few that actually surpass the original. Most are done to cash in on the previous work's popularity. But there are, of course, some that actually are able to go above and beyond their predecessors. And that is Turok 2. It is a true sequel. It improves on all of Turok 1's deficiencies.
Now, before we get into the purity that is Turok 2, we must first take a look at the history of Turok, going all the way back to issue number 1 of Turok the Dinosaur Hunter.
First and foremost, this game has absolutely nothing to do with the original Turok comic series. Basically, they created a comic for the game. So all those that complained that Turok the remake had nothing to do with the comic series, really there is no reason to complain, as this game didn't either. Now, there was a comic created for this game. Just because you create a comic for the game does not mean the game follows the comic series. The comic created for this game actually fills in a lot of the background that wasn't actually seen in the game itself. Turok is actually a title rather than a name. The Turok for this game is named Joshua Fireseed. Also, we are introduced to and learn about the various bits of technology seen in the game. We see the Type 4A111 captured quantum singularity storage and containment unit, also known as the Light Burden. We also learn why Turok wears 3D glasses. Essentially, he uses it to find portals and see through enemy camouflage. We even learn who the Turok from the previous game was, a one Carl Fireseed. Basically, here he dies and passes on the mantle of Turok. There is actually one pretty big continuity gaffe. We're led to believe that Joshua Fireseed was the Turok in the first game. Just look at the game cover. He does look like Joshua Fireseed. The only problem is, the in-game character looks nothing like it. See? In fact, he doesn't look much like Carl either. So I really don't know who he is supposed to be. The original Turok from the comic series?
Now, in all reality, does it really matter? There is at least an explanation for the discrepancy in the images. You see, Turok 2 was in development even before Turok 1 was released. So it could have been laziness on part of the developers.
As video game comics go, Turok is pretty good. The artwork is great, the story is decent as far as these things go, and the characters are somewhat believable. Overall, it's a pretty entertaining read.
In addition to the comics, Turok also received a number of novels that are fairly well written and are pretty decent for a shoot-'em-up book.
So without any further delay, let's pop in Turok 2 and take a look. As you would expect from an Apex game, it's awesome even before you actually get to the gameplay. Here is the iguana logo. It comes to life and shoots at you and kills the off-screen character. Talk about aggressive marketing. And here we have the title screen. And you can tell that this game is far more serious than its predecessor. Just listen to this music. Now compare this with the previous game. Now this title song and the music found throughout the rest of the game make you feel like you're going on some friendly jaunt to kill some dinosaurs. Whereas here, both the title song and the music found throughout the game is very serious, and really quite heavy, I'd have to say. It makes you feel like you're doing something important, which, in the context of the game, you are. And now, let's get into the game proper. In the previous Turok, you didn't know where you had to go, or who it was you were fighting, or really what you were supposed to do. Here, it's almost like a joke. This proto-Cortana named Adon tells you where you're fighting, some history about where you're fighting, the enemies you have to fight, some history about the enemies you have to fight, and finally, every single mission objective you have to complete.
You know, Adon reminds me of another character that came out not too long ago. I think it started with a C, Courtesan, Cortina. Oh, Cortana! Yeah, she did the exact same thing, didn't she? In fact, she was also blue, wasn't she? Although more it was a purple shade, I think.
And if it couldn't get more obvious, if you read the Turok books, it turns out that she is an artificial intelligence. Yeah, way to go with originality, Microsoft. The graphics still look good even by today's standards. And you've got to remember, this is stock N64 we're talking about here. The distance fog has been cut down tremendously, and would be even more so with the expansion pack. The texture work is varied and has nowhere near the monotony that the first game had, and the music sounds nowhere near as compressed as the first games. The controls are still as good as they were in Turok 1, and the enemies have even been improved. In Turok 1, they had very few dying animations. Basically, if you shot one, you shot them all. Here, though, they actually take realistic damage. You can blow off arms, you can blow off heads, and you can also blow off various other body parts as well. Not only that, they also react in different ways. Sometimes these Raptoids will run away from you, sometimes these end tails will cloak, or activate a self-destruct mechanism if you shoot them right. The levels are absolutely massive. I have never seen a first-person shooter have levels this big before or since. As a side effect, they are completely non-linear. You can complete whatever objective you want at any time. The thing of it is, though, you're going to want to complete them in a fairly linear order because you don't want to backtrack that much, mainly because your character moves fairly slow. Really, it is quite surprising that they are able to fit such a massive game on an N64 cartridge. The levels in this game are bigger than most of those found in modern games. You are going to get many hours out of this first-person shooter. This isn't some criminally short campaign. This is going to last you like 40 hours, because these levels are actually big. They actually make use of the bloody hardware. If only they had kept up this trend in the future. Like in the first game, you go through a level hub to enter the different levels. And once again, I have to ask, why do the Alterans like to build stargates everywhere? What purpose do these things serve? It has to take a lot of resources just to build one. It's probably even more difficult to build a large number of them in this interdimensional limbo space.
Just repeat yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax.
And you thought the first game had weapons. Oh no. You get 2 pages of them. Look at all this. And on the first page, some of them are doubled up. The weapons menu is a lot better than the first, as you can actually see them all at once rather than having to cycle about. Now you can switch between different ammo types rather than having them simply be single-use power-ups. One final thing, you are actually told what the weapon is when you select it, so now you don't have to guess what it is that you are shooting. You start off with the Freddy Claw, and it does very little damage, and shouldn't be used on, well, anything if you can help it. Later you get a real wrist blade, and it does fairly decent damage, and it should be used in conjunction with either the charged dart rifle or the trank gun. Now, a word on those 2 guns. Sure, at first glance, they both seem useless, but what they do is they put the enemy down for a short time, allowing you to kill it with either a bladed weapon or a weapon that you don't mind using, thus conserving the ammo of your more powerful weapons. As should be expected, you get a bow, and it works as well as you would expect, and is a fairly decent weapon to use until you get the tech bow. The bow itself can fire tech arrows in addition to regular ones, and the tech ones are pretty cool as they make a really ominous sound before exploding. Another good thing about the tech bow is the scope function, that while not making a bit of sense is actually highly useful. Nonetheless, I recommend using this on distant enemies and the tech arrows on stronger enemies that you don't want to waste your more powerful explosives on. Here is the generic pistol. I personally don't like the model as it looks flat in comparison with the one from Turok 1. All told, it's a pistol. Use it until you get a shotgun. This odd weapon here is the Mag 60. It's a machine pistol that fires 3-round bursts. I personally prefer the original assault rifle myself, as it does look a little bit better. Once again, use this on basic enemies to conserve shot shells. And here is the shotgun. I don't like it either, mainly because it's a double-barreled pump-action shotgun, and I'm not really certain that such a weapon would actually be able to exist.
Now, if that thing fired both barrels at the same time, the bloody thing would be tremendously difficult to fire. And speaking from experience, firing two 12-gauge rounds at the same time is going to knock you back quite a bit.
I recommend using this with normal shells on moderate enemies, but save the explosive shells for the shredder.
You are here because the outside world rejects you.
No, not that one. I meant the bloody plasma shotgun. This thing is the auto shotgun's replacement. The only problem is, this is not a shotgun. Rather, like I said earlier, it's a plasma shotgun, because if you look at it, it does not look like a bloody shotgun shot. This weapon with explosive shells is fairly good at taking down large enemies, and here is the plasma rifle. Its return is less than spectacular, as it is a plasma sniper rifle rather than a plasma assault rifle, and as such has a very low cyclic rate, and like with the Tecmo, should only be used on fairly strong, distant enemies. The Gatling gun is also fairly unimpressive, as it has a very low cyclic rate and is not very powerful. And now on page 2 we have the greatest weapon in gaming history, the cerebral bore. That's right, this thing will attach itself to an enemy's head, suck out its brain matter, and then explode. Use it whenever you get the chance. Here is the Mine Layer, a weapon that is really somewhat out of place in a game like this. However, I recommend saving it for use on fairly large enemies. The rocket launcher works as you would expect. Just be sure to use your rockets sparingly, as they are fairly hard to find. The flamethrower is the most graphically complex weapon, as it uses polygonal flame effects that were really not seen up until this point. Sure, it looks bad now, but for its time, it looked really quite good. The flamethrower is best suited for the very small enemies. The Smart Disc has to be my favorite weapon in the game. It requires no ammo and is extremely powerful. However, I will admit that it is somewhat unbalancing, as it really is a one-hit kill weapon. The Fire Pod is okay. When you use it on the Blind One's enemies, they roast up really nice. But on all the other enemies, it just stuns them for a bit. And really, that's why you have the Charge Dart Rifle and the Tranquilizer Gun. So really, outside of one level, you don't really need it. And here is the Nuke. It's hard to find, and really isn't worth it. It's a combination of the Freeze Gun and the Quantum Singularity Gun from Turok 1. But really, it's quite a disappointment. But what isn't a disappointment is the Dinosaur. On level 2, you get to take control of this dino, and you get to drive him around like he was a tank. You get an artillery cannon and a machine gun. The best part of it, though, is that you can impale enemies on his horn. For the time, this was amazing. The idea that you could control a vehicle was something that really was fairly new at the time. The game does chug a lot here, but it's not that big of a detriment. But in addition to all of those, you also get underwater weapons. You get a harpoon gun, which is basically just an underwater version of the bow and arrow, and you also get a torpedo launcher that you can use to travel quickly underwater with. And yes, you can shoot the torpedoes out of water. It's just really quite difficult, and I have yet to be able to actually hit anything with them. But in all reality, these add another dimension to underwater combat. And now let's take a look at the hapless chili meat that you are going to be using these weapons on. The first level features Dinozoids, genetically engineered dinosaurs that have a variety of weapons ranging from just talons to plasma launchers and grenades. They're fairly basic and are really just the cannon fodder of the game. Also on the first level, you encounter the Flesh Eaters. These enemies are actually kind of scary, but they're not much more powerful than the others. But just listen to their introduction.
face, human! Powers beyond the comprehension of flesh! Have you set in motion? The primages must not be stopped!
With this kind of introduction, they actually appear to be threatening. You gain access to them by going into random warp portals spread throughout the game. The River of Souls stage has pretty much the same enemies as the first level, but there are a few additions. You have to face supernatural enemies like these witch things, and zombies as well. The Death Marshes contain the Purlin. These are enemies from the first game that have been massively expanded into an entire army unto themselves. They are all fairly large and can take up a lot of damage. One thing that is rather humorous is the fact that you cannot use the cerebral bore on them because they are supposed to be so unintelligent that the bore cannot home in on them. The layer of the blind ones has the aforementioned blind ones. They are no more powerful than the other enemies that you face. Also down here you face the Fireborn. In all reality, they are just reskinned versions of the end-tail dinosaurs. Also returning from the first game, we have the Mantids. And coming from a person who hates bugs, they are suitably creepy. As enemies, the Mantids are fairly decent. Some of them fly around, providing a fairly good challenge. The Primogen's Lightship, which is the final level, has a number of grossly deformed robots that are quite imposing and actually put up a bit of a challenge. Now let's take a look at the horrible creatures that are in charge of this massive army of aberrations. The best part about the bosses is that they are all suitably large. And that is really a problem with some games, even today. A lot of the bosses just do not have a significant sense of scale, meaning that they just don't feel big. Here, they're all massive, and they actually feel like they are a threat. They all take up a sizable portion of the screen and really feel menacing. Another good thing is that they don't actually have the word boss over the enemy's life bar.
Now in many games, the final boss is a pretty big letdown. Doom 3, all you did was run around in a circle and shoot basic enemies. In Turok 1, you shot a Tiki Man. Here, you don't get off quite so easily.
The Primogen boss is one of the most difficult bosses that I have ever had to face. This thing is almost impossible to take down. He has a massive number of hit points and actually regains health unless you shoot him in a specific manner. When you face this boss and beat him, you have earned the ending. Although here, there are two separate endings. You have the bad ending, which incidentally is the canon ending. You achieve this one by either using cheats or not collecting every single item in the game. The good ending basically is closed-ended. Basically with that one, you kill the Primogen, the Lost Land is saved, end of story. Which is not necessarily bad because all the later Turok games were nowhere near as good as this one. So really it's a debate on whether you want the canon open-ended one or the non-canon close-ended one. But I will tell you from my perspective, if I spend all this time beating a game, I had better bloody well get the canon ending.
Needless to say, Turok 2 is one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time. The gameplay is fairly varied and creative, and the soundtrack complements it quite well. Now, if you're not into retro gaming, I still recommend giving this game a download, and at least giving it a try. The gameplay is fairly first-person shooter standard. The graphics are not so bad as to be a horribly pixelated mess, and the controls are easily emulated on like a 360 controller.
Turok 2 would be, in my opinion, the best Turok game ever made. There would, however, be two more Turok games released on the N64. Turok Rage Wars, a game that was entirely multiplayer-focused, and Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion. I never played either one of those back in the day, but recently I have given them a try. Turok Rage Wars was a forward-thinking concept, since multiplayer was just then really gaining popularity, but it suffered from the same problem all multiplayer-only games face. If you don't have people to play with, all you get to do is shoot bots.
Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion thankfully returned to a single-player focus and was far more story-oriented than any Turok game before. Also, unlike with the previous games, you had 2 characters to choose from, and you could potentially unlock Joshua Fireseed provided you beat the game on hard and without cheats. Eventually, I do intend to review the Turok remake, but until that time, this is General Lotz wishing you good, perfect dark, good Half-Life, or whatever makes you happy.